Common Purpose is a live stream podcast featuring Tim Kelly, a Chattanooga-based businessman and mayoral candidate who loves this city and has made his life here. Beyond the conversation, Common Purpose is a show about elevating the bonds that unite us as a community and resisting the forces that would tear us apart.
Welcome to Common Purpose, our podcast about elevating the bonds that unite us here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm Tim Kelly, and today we're turning our attention to an issue that's been an ongoing challenge in Chattanooga for years, and of course that's homelessness. We had Jen and John from the county on before you came on, Jens, but today we have none other than the other person who knows the most that there is to know about homelessness in Chattanooga, and that's Jens Christensen. Jens is the CEO of the Community Kitchen, and has been on the front lines of our city's homeless situation for how many years now, Jens?
Nearly 20.
20 years, yeah. So if there's anybody that knows more about it, I can't imagine who they would be. And that's why you're here, right? We're homelessness has been it's been a difficult problem arguably everywhere in the country, but certainly in Chattanooga. It's one of those problems that I don't know that we can ever fully eliminate, but we need to manage it well. And certainly during the COVID crisis, we've seen it get demonstrably worse. Sure. It's the issue I hear most about out kind of knocking on doors and talking to people. So thank you for being here, first and foremost. Maybe we can just start out telling us how you got to Chattanooga and got involved at the Community Kitchen.
You know, Tim, you mentioned that homelessness is a huge challenge, and it's a reality that not just Chattanooga deals with,
right,
but every community deals with it. It's a significant thing, and it's important to think about the reality that a homeless person is a citizen. They're in many cases, they're taxpayers. Yep. They're people that are contributing, and there are a lot of misunderstandings about it. And we'll get into that. We've got time to get into that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned how I ended up here. I'm actually, in a roundabout way, I'm sort of from here. I actually grew up in West Virginia, okay. But my father and his family moved here in the 60s to Lookout Mountain. He attended Baylor. My grandfather actually moved here to found the J.C. Bradford brokerage here in Chattanooga.
I remember that.
So it was a huge connection, and I grew up in West Virginia mostly. I went to third grade on Lookout, and then I came back here in 10th grade and graduated from Chattanooga School for the Arts and Sciences. I moved into the Fort Wood neighborhood.
Yep. My neighborhood, I must say.
Yeah, this was a while ago, I might say.
Yeah, fair enough. Fort Wood hasn't changed much.
Yeah. And so, after graduating there, I went to North Carolina for college. And I came back here, a thing or two about motorcycles. I was on a motorcycle trip to Alaska, and my grandfather was in his 90s at the time, and I stopped by to visit him, and he was not doing well. We thought he was going to be passing any minute. He didn't. By the time he passed several years later, I had a job.
That's great.
I was actually working at the Community Kitchen. Yep. I had a house, lived in St. Elmo, was beginning to build a family. So I came home for a second time, I guess, in a way, and I've been here since.
That's outstanding. Well, I'm sorry it took your grandfather's illness to bring you back, but we're certainly glad you're here. It's hard to imagine how much worse the problem would be without you standing in the gap, very frankly. And so,
it's the kitchen, it's the people that we work with. I think they'd be fine without me. I appreciate the kindness, but the last really, I've been at the kitchen since 2004, and really understanding what's happened and watching what's happened. It's truly the people in the front line that make the difference. They have an incredibly difficult job, especially now during COVID when they're having direct one-on-one interaction with so many different people.
Mm-hmm. Well, so tell me for those of the people watching and listening who just have never heard of the Community Kitchen, what is it and what does it do?
So the Chattanooga Community Kitchen was founded in 1982. We were founded by 7 downtown churches here in the city of Chattanooga. We are a faith-based organization. We're an organization of churches and governed by churches, but the design was never to require anyone to participate in any sort of religious programming. So there is no pray-to-play requirement whatsoever.
I hadn't heard that term before, but
it's a very common ministry or mission-based term. Mm-hmm. You see it in a lot of organizations, and really there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I don't want to suggest there is. That's what their mission is. But our mission was actually just to provide the help, the sustenance, the sustainability that people needed in their lives to get off of the streets. Mm-hmm. The churches that founded us had no interest in replacing themselves. They weren't all the same church. It wasn't a group of Presbyterian churches or Episcopal churches. It was churches of different faiths, of generally Christian, but organizations of faith that wanted to come together in how do we help people? Mm-hmm. How do we work together to eliminate this problem and to serve the people that are experiencing it firsthand? So they understood that they wanted community involved in those people's lives, but they didn't want them to suddenly be going to the community kitchen as their church.
Right.
Instead, it was the place that really provided the hands and feet of that mission work. So we started in 82. For the first 3 years, we were homeless, which is a bit interesting of itself.
Yeah.
We were serving meals out of 2 different churches downtown, St. Peter and Paul Catholic on the weekends and Christ Episcopal on the weekdays. And then by 85, we acquired a building across from the old Onion Bottom Farmers Market on 11th Street. We're still in that building, but we've grown from the center building to be the city block long.
Mm-hmm.
In that building, we provide 3 meals a day, every day of the year. We provide shelter when it's cold out. Right now, we're providing shelter to people that are otherwise maybe dying on the streets.
Yeah.
We have family shelter, so we have over 100, and some years actually 150 families that go through our shelter there at the McClellan Shelter for Families. We also provide permanent supportive housing, which would be housing for people that they're the folks that you see panhandling on the corner that really have these challenging issues and need supportive housing to be independent and stay on their own.
Jan and I were just talking about supportive housing and the need for more of it in Chattanooga, yeah.
Yeah, the Fuse Initiative is absolutely something that mirrors what we've been doing for a very long time. Actually, we started permanent supportive housing almost 20 years ago.
That's great.
With that kind of process through transitional for families and other things like that. But, our mission is basically divided into 2 things. The first is meeting the most urgent basic needs of homeless, hungry, and vulnerable people in our community. Community is Chattanooga. And the second is walking with them on a path to self-sufficiency.
Right.
So if you think about what you might need as a person on the street, as a person without a place to turn tonight, our goal is to provide for all of those needs at the beginning and then help you never need them again.
Yeah, I mean that is a lofty goal, but I mean, so how have you seen the homeless population change over the years since you started? Grow, shrink? Has it changed in terms of character management?
Oh, there's been a dramatic shift. And actually that can go back to 82 when we were founded. The reason for the founding of the community kitchen, the Old Jotty Bridge was there, but US 27 didn't keep going. It did on the Dayton Boulevard, but it didn't as Corridor J that we know it today. So people would come into town, they would get to that point and they'd look down and they would see the steeples of several of these churches. And they would knock on the door, they would go and ask people for help. A lot of times it was a little old lady sitting there, and most of the people that were coming through were vagrants, the people that you think of as the hobo, a guy with a broken down car or a person who just came into town, they're asking for money.
Yeah, end of the line sort of thing.
End of the line sort of thing, yeah. Chattanooga, here they are, and they just wanted this help. There were a number of people, too, that were from the local areas, and most of the poverty at that time was in the central downtown area.
Right.
So they were seeing a tremendous amount of people just walking door to door from church to church asking for help.
Yeah.
That has shifted over the last 30 years to really be about families.
Yeah.
We're seeing more families with children than any other segment of the homeless population growing and becoming, a predominant situation.
Ooh, that's tragic. I mean, so maybe that's a good segue to segmentation, right? My wife and I volunteered at the community kitchen for quite some time, and I have my own theory. Serving breakfast every morning, you could tell. You can't treat them all the same, and you and I've talked about this before. So talk about segmentation a little bit and how you see them, in different groups or and how you treat each one according to their needs.
Well, that's a good conversation we can kind of follow probably on what you and Jana were discussing.
Right.
I wasn't in the room, but I can imagine, much of it because I've been involved in the Fuse discussion since the beginning when she had the idea from Mecklenburg County in North Carolina and brought it back here and started talking to some of the service providers about it. We've actually done an ACT team in Chattanooga before.
Okay.
The Assertive Community Treatment Team, this was when I was a case manager, so we're talking like 2004 to 7, somewhere in that range, was the pilot program here in Chattanooga. And the big thing to think about is that if you look at the population of individuals who experience homelessness in a given year, there will be about 4,000 of them in Chattanooga. Every year it's between 3,500 and 4,500. Okay, on a given night you're looking at about 600 to 700 that we can count.
Right.
There are more than that. The state government assumes it's 40% higher than whatever we tell them, just based on that, because you can't count them all.
Sure,
you walk down the street and say, "Hey, are you homeless?"
Right.
Yeah, you're going to get great conversations, I'm sure, and no one will be fed up with you at all. But in that group, only about 10% of them are these really high-end users, the ones that need the most support, the ones that you see on a street corner asking for money, the ones that are kind of creating vagrancy problems downtown that business owners might be upset about.
Right.
90% of those individuals then are people that are going to experience episodic homelessness. That means they're going to be homeless for a short period of time. They're not wanting to be homeless. They're not trying to be homeless. They're not actually doing anything that defines them as homeless in any way.
Gotcha.
Instead, they're trying to get off the street.
Right.
They're trying to get into housing.
Right.
And in most cases, you'll never even know that they were homeless.
Right. I mean, I've got friends and employees who were in that category. Who
Absolutely.
told me, yes, I was homeless. I was sleeping in my car for X period of time, and they managed to bounce back. But you're exactly right. I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, my friend Becky Welch over at Met Men will often say they don't even know they're homeless.
It's an interesting observation.
It's absolutely true. It's people that are bouncing back and forth on somebody's couch. They don't have a clue where they're going to stay tonight, and they have no idea that they're homeless. They haven't even. It's not sunk into them because, like so many others, they think of homelessness as a pejorative thing.
Something that's happening to somebody else.
And it's a terrible. And it's a bad person. They judge the person based on the term homeless. They're defining them.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so easy to sort of, when you make it abstract like that, it carries with it sort of a dehumanization, which is so important
very much
to get
so.
around very quickly and realize that every single one of them is a human being.
It's
and
the
a family
guy,
member and
Yeah, it's the guy you see in the corner that says, "We'll work for food," when really all he wants is beer. And
Right.
you assume that. And a lot of times when I'm speaking with groups, I'll show photographs as my introduction. And it'll be a photograph after a photograph after a photograph of the man who looks like a hobo, all the way to the newborn baby.
Yeah.
And then everything in between, the person working at the assembly line, the person working in the chicken plant.
Yeah.
And I ask the question each time I flip through that photograph, is this person homeless?
Yeah.
And you get to see people automatically assume the ones that look homeless are homeless, the ones that don't, they're not.
Yeah.
But the truth was, or will be, that every photograph I show is of a homeless individual, a person who is homeless at that moment. And, if you want to know what it looks like, go to the church, go to the mall, go to the food court, look around. That's what homelessness looks like.
Yeah.
So you asked about segmentation
Yes.
a minute ago, and that's really so important because each individual group cannot receive the same services to succeed. A person who is just homeless right at this moment because they lost their job or they were evicted, we see this a lot, especially with low-income housing or lower-income housing, where individuals are evicted not because they did something wrong, but because the facility itself is no longer up to code.
Gotcha.
They're shutting down the building. The power was shut off. The water is shut off. There's something the landlord hasn't done. And it's not often a landlord's issue either. It's just the condition of the structure.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times in that group, it's something about, it's happened to you in a sense. I don't want to make anyone sound like a victim. I don't mean that. But something has occurred that's outside of your control.
Yeah.
And now you're homeless.
Right.
Okay. You're making $10 an hour. You don't really have the money to go pay $2,500 in deposits. You can't just pick up and move.
And the disconnection aspect, right? I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about this a little bit with Jana, but there's this theory of homelessness that it really has to do with broken social connections, right?
Oh yeah, and she got that from. We used to have a monk on staff, Brother Ron Fender, years ago.
I remember Father Ron.
Yeah. So Brother Ron would tell people if they asked him, "What's the cause of homelessness?" and he'd say, "It's the broken heart."
Yeah.
That was his answer for that was, and he was right in so many ways because. You can talk about the breakdown of the family. You can talk about the breakdown of social and cultural norms. I mean, I'm worried about right now the COVID pandemic causing, breakdowns in corporate culture.
No doubt.
If you don't know your boss and you how do you bond? How do you talk about what we did last Saturday and your team worked together really well? That's sort of like what happens when a person has exhausted all of their resources.
Yeah.
And I have friends they'll come and volunteer with us and they'll look around and they go, I could never end up like this. I've got a family member who will take me in. I've got another buddy who would put up with me if I had to.
Until you play that game of Jenga, with your life.
Try
and
it.
Suddenly.
Try it. It gets old pretty fast. Your feet start to sink. Your snoring starts to get on their nerves.
Yeah.
And, you exhaust those connections.
Yeah.
And that was Brother Ron's, it's the broken heart.
Well, it's a great insight. We all miss him. He was an incredible Chattanoogan. So talk about, God, this is painful at this time during the holidays in particular, but but you mentioned that families are an increasing population within the homeless population. What can we do, or what do you think needs to happen to support that particular segment?
So, and that actually is kind of a bigger question, I think, because when we talk about the segmentation itself, Jana's working with the Fuse team to look at that smaller 10% group that's consuming so many resources, that's so challenging, and they need the very intensive, supportive wraparound case management, someone who's available to keep them there. They're going to be struggling from mental illness. They're going to be struggling from addiction, these complicating factors.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the family, they need a good job. They need a forgiving landlord.
Yep.
They need a little bit of assistance for a shorter period of time. I mentioned our McClellan Shelter for Families.
Yep.
First of its kind in Chattanooga, where somebody can actually show up in the middle of the night if they're homeless with children, and if we have room, they can move in right then.
That's outstanding.
The average stay there is under 3 weeks. Okay.
Which is as it should be, right? I mean,
What's
that would run counter to what most people perceive. Oh, they're just going to camp out and live there.
Oh, not at all. No.
Yeah.
And some of that's by design. It's a very clean, comfortable environment, but there's not a TV in the room. You don't want to encourage anyone to be there, and that is important in social services, to have a healthy level of discomfort.
Right.
You want them to be surrounded in compassion. You want them to be clean. And then, we had EPB come in and put, a wireless hotspot so that the families there can continue the schooling of their children during this period. You want to accommodate their needs.
Right.
You don't want to make it their destination.
No, that's right.
So really around 3 weeks is most of the time what they need. Then they're on their feet, they're on to greater stability, and they're moving on. Very different than the individual who might need years and years of actual case management, sobriety treatment, the other things that go around it in order to succeed. Yep. And that's where that mission comes in.
Which is where Fuse comes in, or other social services.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So we've talked about, this is a broad one, and I guess we'll probably spend the rest of the time talking about this one, but the ways in which the nonprofit community can work better with the city in Chattanooga. I mean, we can get as specific or general as you like, but again, you have as good a lens on this as anybody alive in Chattanooga. So can you talk about some things you think that need to happen in order to improve the situation in Chattanooga with homelessness?
That's a challenge in every community.
Yep.
Certainly not unique to us. Chattanooga's done a lot of incredible things in social services. We have a very rich social service environment. People are aware of that. There are a lot of nonprofits here.
Right.
I think it's like churches, nonprofits, and lawyers. I think we're the 1, 2, and 3 in the country for. Right. But we have a lot of nonprofits here. The nonprofits that are here, especially in the social service area, we work together fairly well. The major from Salvation Army, he and I talk on a regular basis. The head of Homeless Healthcare Center, we talk regularly, meet with them regularly. Janet was exiting as I was coming in, and what are we doing? We're catching up.
Yeah.
There's a knowledge, there's a rapport.
Yep.
We've also done a lot of amazing things historically in the city of Chattanooga in partnership with the government. The Homeless Healthcare Center is run by the Hamilton County Health Department, but it originally was created as a partnership between the Chattanooga Community Kitchen and the city of Chattanooga. So the city government and a nonprofit mission-based organization came together and created the first of its kind in the nation, freestanding Joint Commission on Health certified primary care provider for homeless individuals. It's been a model throughout the country as a successful and very positive addition. On top of that, we've had pilot programs. Again, I mentioned assertive community treatment. We've always been ahead of the curve with what's called the Continuum of Care, which is the HUD funded initiative surrounding homelessness, where we do permanent supportive housing. We've done rapid rehousing. You asked about these things, and I'm talking in big words.
Yep.
They're things that people in the business know, but permanent supportive housing is, again, like that Fuse model. It's what the people on the street corner need for the intensive supports. Rapid rehousing is basically a euphemism for saying we're going to pay your bills for a couple months until you get back on your feet. Okay, we're not going to do it unless you can show how you're going to get back on your feet, but it's that bridge loan to help somebody get through that they don't end up having to pay back.
Yeah.
They'll have a case manager, but they don't have these other issues where they need the intensive treatment.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of great things like that in the community. And currently, there are some positive things that are coming out of the initiatives too, like the flexible spending account, which is something that is put together at the city level. And the city is actually providing the funds to help people with the deposits. I mentioned that a little while ago.
Right. They do that with a debit card, or how does it actually?
Nope. They do it much smarter than that. They do it through partner agencies. So if you're working with me and you're a case manager in the program and my family is homeless and I'm expressing to you, look, I found a place. I got $800 to get us in there. I've got a job. I know I can succeed, but they want $1,600 for me to start, and I owe $300 on my power bill.
Yeah.
Okay. This can actually help you overcome those barriers to get you into the housing, get you off the street. It sounds to some people like a handout. It's very far from a handout.
Yeah.
Okay. There's accountability for it. There's also participation. And it's investment sense. It's smart from a business model. It's so much cheaper to help these folks get into housing where they will succeed than it is for them to be in this supportive system, going to the emergency room.
Yeah. Well, Jen and I talked about that very thing.
Yeah.
That, this is one of these things where the moral thing to do is also the economically wise thing to do. And boy, what a no-brainer that is if you can connect those dots from both sides.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
yeah, there's a business model that's brilliant in that. And that's something that the service providers in Chattanooga, we've come together and we've been able to do very well.
Yeah.
There's a myth to some people. They think that homelessness here in Chattanooga is dealt with so well that we're attracting people from outside the community.
I hear that all the time.
I hear
further stories
from
about
the
buses unloading and things like that because Chattanooga is such a great place to be homeless. And I find it, it strains credulity, as they say. I've never, I don't know why that's such a persistent myth here, but
well, there is something, and it's a terrible thing to admit, but in social services, I've seen people use what they call Greyhound therapy. That is a reality.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah. No,
but it happens rarely. Yeah. What that is when you find someone that's so challenging to work with, they've burned every bridge in a community, they put them on a Greyhound bus and send them wherever.
Yeah.
Okay, Chattanooga is not a destination for that.
Wouldn't think so.
No, and the reason we're not, so we do have incredible things in this community. We have great partnerships, but we don't have a shelter that is a true low-barrier shelter, a place that someone can just go sleep tonight.
So what's the difference between what you guys have on 11th Street and a shelter per se?
And that's a great question. Yeah. So we do operate shelters, okay? The family shelter is actually a low-barrier shelter.
Okay.
If children are involved, you can show up. You need an ID. You basically need to pass a background check that says I've not committed domestic violence recently, and then we can move you in. Okay, that's pretty low barrier, particularly for families.
Right.
But a true shelter is a place where people can line up and they can actually just check in on a nightly basis. Okay, it's that place they're going to sleep tonight.
Right.
We have the Union Gospel Mission, which primarily used to operate a mission shelter on Main Street, primarily does now transitional and permanent housing.
Right.
We have the Chattanooga Rescue Mission. Okay, they are a mission first, and they have about 60 beds or fewer.
Right.
When we look at an average night here in Chattanooga of 700 plus homeless individuals,
that's not going to
the
get
capacity is not there.
And that also relates. We've talked about this, right? Relates to law enforcement issues too.
It does. It creates an issue. Chief Roddy would probably tell you himself. Creates an issue for them because if they find someone downtown on a bench and there isn't a shelter for them, but they're not breaking any laws other than being present,
right?
That's not really something they can enforce.
Yeah.
Okay. But if there is a shelter, it goes through so many levels. A case manager too. If you meet with me and I'm the individual you're trying to find housing for, and tonight you don't know where I'm going to sleep. You start looking for me, it might take you a week to find me if I'm spread out. But if I'm in a shelter, you know precisely where I am. The continuity of care is there. You can come, you can meet with me, you can assist me. Yeah. So it meets a lot. It actually does a lot of great things. Yeah. It is the first step in taking care of the issue of all persons, no matter what segment they're from. If you don't know, and that's why the kitchen exists there, and I'll get to our other shelters in a second, but if you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, you don't know what you're going to eat today, you don't know where you're going to find a change of clothing, these basic needs, it's very difficult to think about how you're going to escape from that.
It's the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
It is, precisely.
Most of us never get to that level, that base level of the pyramid, but when you're there, you're exactly, you can't really think about much else.
Well, it also creates a lot of other issues, and people think of homelessness as an issue that's created by mental health, created by substance abuse issues, but in fact, it's not. Now, it is true that if you're a substance abuser or you're mentally ill, you are more likely to become homeless. But being homeless doesn't tell me that you're more likely to be a substance abuser or mentally ill.
Right.
More often than not, people become a substance abuser once they become homeless. They're having a challenge figuring out where they're going to go. The hopelessness, that broken heart, that is going to lead to self-medication. Yeah. And so
then you've got a downward spiral.
And then they become the guy on the street corner that you pass and it's a gray blur and you try to pretend they're not human because they scare you a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
A little bit frightening, a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that shelter, that's the first stop for everyone.
Yep.
Okay. It doesn't matter if you're an employed person who has hit some hard times and you simply need a couple of nights to sleep. It doesn't matter if you're the person on the street corner with flying the sign that says we'll work for food or just need a beer, give me $5.
Right.
You need a place to sleep tonight, and a social worker, a case manager, a program cannot work with you without that level of stability. So it's something we really need here in Chattanooga, is that place to start.
Agreed. And is there sort of an ideal location or configuration for a shelter like that? Or I mean,
now you're getting into a big question. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We've looked at best practices across the country.
Well, and that was my next question: is are there best practices you've seen elsewhere that that really we should be looking at here?
Absolutely. And before we get too far down there, what we do right now with a cold weather shelter, it is low barrier, but it's only seasonal.
Gotcha.
It's on a night. Right now, we're doing it when it's 32 degrees or below for more than 4 hours on a night. When it's 40 degrees, or actually 35 degrees or below for more than 4 hours, or when it's 40 degrees or below for more than 4 hours and raining.
Okay.
So it's really a life-saving effort. It's not, it's not designed to be something where we're truly providing shelter. That's a partnership between the city, the Chattanooga Regional Homeless Coalition, and the Chattanooga Community Kitchen right now.
Right.
So anyone can show up for that. We are doing COVID screening. And if somebody does test positive, we have instant tests there available through the health department's homeless healthcare center. See those partnerships happening.
Right.
And then the Salvation Army is operating the isolation area with Major Smith so that if they do test positive, they get quarantined.
That's great.
In a certain location.
Triage at its finest.
It works very, very well so far. We've had 14 that were diverted.
Okay.
On an average night, we have about 30 right now.
Wow.
This time last year, we had a lot more. And that's a good testimony to what we've done as a team through the COVID period. But the other shelters we operate are program shelters.
Okay.
So they're for people that once they have started sobriety treatment or they've started permanent supportive housing pathways, they'll be in those shelters.
Okay.
So, and then, of course, the mission is a mission first and a shelter second.
Right.
And there are some other partners like Chattanooga Room in the Inn, Family Promise that are for families that are also program shelters as things go on.
Gotcha.
But we don't have that one where you go tonight if you're just
All-purpose.
a single man,
Right.
single woman, and you just need a place to sleep.
Right.
And
is there a best, sort of design configuration or location for such a thing?
So location, the best description for that would be it should be near other services. It should be proximate to, and it should be accessible.
Right.
Okay, so there's not necessarily a best location, except that you need to look at it in the context of each city. And that's in the successful places like New Orleans, where we've seen it work very well. We see a partnership between several service providers. We see a partnership that includes the municipal governments, that includes even the tourist industries and things, because it's benefiting everyone.
Sure.
And it benefits the community at large. Those seem to be very successful. They also typically will adopt a model where a person comes in and they are able to stay there until they get into housing.
Gotcha.
So it sort of steps up on its own, and they receive the services. They then move into housing from there and have the service providers already there working with them.
Makes sense. Yeah, that coordinated hub model seems to make a ton of sense.
Co-location of services, we joke about it with the Homeless Healthcare Center. They're directly across the street from us. And they'll tell us somebody walking out the door to come see us or somebody walking out our door to go see them.
It's hard to get lost.
They do.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
They do manage to get lost, even just walking across the street.
Yeah.
I tell people with families in particular, do you want people to know you're homeless? You don't. They're embarrassed.
Yeah.
They're it's not something they're proud of.
Right.
So there's a barrier to receiving services, and for some people it's just hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
But when you add the
I
stigma,
can't even ask for directions. I don't know how I'd manage that.
just across the street.
Yeah.
That's what,
Yeah.
But the stigma surrounding it
Yeah.
sort of creates a barrier for people also.
Yeah, for
So if you could have that co-location, that hub, that access right there, success is much greater.
Yeah. Well, I think that is something that the next mayor needs to be looking at hard, because
Just
I
people in
do
general.
think, COVID has, that old, I guess it was Warren Buffett who said, you never know who's swimming naked till the tide goes out,
Right.
Well, the tide's gone out in a lot of respects with COVID, and I think, again, you guys are doing a great job of standing in the gap with the problem, but clearly it's exposed a lot of flaws in our systems, both in public health and economics and affordable housing. And
2021 is going to be a big challenge too, because with we've had a furlough in the court system, so evictions were delayed.
Yeah.
And again, this is going to be primarily affecting families with children. People, I have children. I was, joking. We have a 10-week-old surprise, and then we've got a 11 and 15-year-olds.
You figured out what's causing it yet?
Yeah, I figured that part out.
Okay,
but
I'm just curious.
The doctor explained it.
Yeah,
there were drawings. It was challenging for me to get. I'm kind of slow sometimes.
Yeah.
But so we have that situation. And it's been hard for us.
Oh yeah.
Just doing the schooling at home
sure.
half the time. The teachers, gosh, they're dealing with so much, and we have these single parents that are dealing with this too.
It's been a brutal year for mental health, for everything. There's been a lot of raging debates about COVID, how to handle this, very, very early on. And the fact of the matter is it's not really a economy health problem. It's a health problem. It's a take your pick, because if you stay cooped up, again, I'm certainly not now where we are with COVID numbers, but there aren't any easy answers, right? You can't throw the doors open, but nor can we just stay completely locked down, because the toll it's taking on mental health, physical health, financial health.
Businesses are closing left and right, and we're seeing a lot of service industry people coming in uniform for meals at the kitchen. And
I noticed that when I was volunteering, back pre-COVID.
So we're seeing it a lot more now. People that are working in the service industry that are coming for meals because they just, they're worried they're losing their jobs, they're losing their hours.
Yeah.
And that's the dilemma that we're facing as social service providers. And we meet about this every week, and we talk about it. Yeah. Of course, we haven't missed a day. We haven't missed a meal. We can't. What we do requires that. But you notice I'm wearing a mask, cautious about it.
Sure.
Our employees are. And we've had some that, of course, we're not comfortable with it. And the way I need to explain it to many people is if you have one exposure in a room, okay, and this is with my employees in particular, whether or not they feel symptoms, whether or not they actually have become infected, those people that were in that room cannot work tomorrow.
Right.
That is a health department restriction. Right. It is because it's a pandemic.
Yep.
Okay. We can't afford not to be able to serve tomorrow.
Right.
It's just not an option.
It's not an option at all. You're exactly right. And the good news is, of course, we know that good protocol works. I mean, my businesses were essential businesses, and we worked. It's hard to believe in retrospect. We've literally worked. 2 days ago will have been 9 months. And had one case, with 100 employees. So it works, if you follow the good policies. And
we've been fortunate.
Work. Yeah, exactly.
Zero so far and staff at the kitchen.
Really.
Zero so
far. That is remarkable. Yeah.
We've been very cautious. We have 50 employees every day coming to work. We have over half of them are homeless or formerly homeless.
Yep.
So it's been a big thing, and we're seeing a big spike in the homeless population.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really about those safety protocols, and it's a blessing. There's some definitely God is at work in that sense with us, and has been really protecting us. So we can't take credit for it, but we are definitely blessed by it.
Wow. How can people help? I mean, in this time, I know you guys are always raising money. And this time, year end, this is a time when a lot of people that are fortunate enough to be able to, give to help, and goodness knows during the holidays with families in crisis, people will want to help. So if somebody wants to help, get involved, volunteer, donate, how would they do that?
So they can learn a lot about us at homelesschattanooga.org.
Okay.
We look at it. There are two basic reasons that someone would come to our website. One is they want to learn about us. They want to get involved. The other is they need help.
Yeah.
So as soon as you hit our website, you have two choices. One button says get help. The other button says get involved. Click the get involved. It leads up. You can sign up to volunteer online. And really, that's been an incredible challenge this year, too. And I think so many people are experiencing that. But volunteers, are so critical to nonprofit and social service work. Across the nonprofit realm, volunteers are essential, and we've lost a lot of those. So if people wanted to get involved, of course, not so much needed on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Get a lot of people wanting to volunteer on Christmas Day, but throughout the week, throughout the months, throughout the year to come, sign up, start serving a meal. It's critical.
I can tell you from personal experience that it is. It's kind of a corollary of the old, giving does a lot more for the giver than the receiver, and it's absolutely true.
Oh, it does a lot for our staff too. We're used to having 5 volunteers per staff member, generally in the kitchen, and that has not been the case over the last several months.
I bet.
We got a lot of great people who are coming back, but the other side of that though is if you're uncomfortable, don't feel stressed.
What's so tough
We've got PPE, we've got even barricades between you and the individuals you'll be serving that are plexiglass that protect you, air filtration that's going on, sanitization that's happening on a routine clock. But don't come down if you're not well. Don't come down if you don't feel well. But if you are comfortable and you can help, we could use it.
Yeah, well, of course, I've visited recently, and I can vouch for the fact that the protocols you have in place are excellent. And clearly, I mean, really, if you think about the fact that you guys, with the disparate population you serve and your own people there, that you've had, no cases is I mean, arguably it is divine protection, because that's amazing.
Yeah. And logistics this year have been incredible too. So we're grateful to the health department for such assistance, especially at the Homeless Health Care Center.
No doubt. anything else you want to share with our guests and listeners and watchers?
I think if anyone walked away from this and just had one thought, it's that homelessness isn't what you think.
Yeah.
Homelessness is the man, woman, child that you might see walking down the street one day. It is the vast majority of it is episodic. It's temporary. It's not defining. It's just something. It's a road. It's a speed bump in their pathway to success.
Yeah.
And because of that, I hope people have compassion for it, and I hope they recognize that we're in a wonderful town. Chattanooga is an incredible place.
It is,
and we're blessed because of the supportive community that we're in.
No doubt. Well, thank you for everything you do. It's remarkable. Not many people. 11th Street is not a main thoroughfare, but it's right square in the middle of downtown. And I think a lot of people would do well to educate themselves about what you do and how important it is. And I look forward to continuing to work with you to make Chattanooga a better place.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jens, and big thanks to our audience for tuning in. And feel free to chime in with feedback if there's anything else you want to say or anything particular you'd like us to talk about. I'd like to thank Summer Dregs. He's a local artist for contributing his music to the podcast, and OCI for contributing our steady furniture. You've been watching Common Purpose. I'm Tim Kelly. Stay healthy and stay hopeful, Chattanooga.
Baby, hold me. And I love it that you know me so much better than the old me. Maybe it's cliche.